that there are essentially two schools of economic thought, the Austrian school and the Keynesian school, and we recognize that the Keynesians seem to think that if they'll just control the supply of money and expand it and contract it and adjust the interest rates, they can keep the economy stable. That's what the Keynesians believe. And the Austrians say, you'll never outsmart the market, and it will find a way around, and no amount of wisdom from man is going to be able to keep the economy stable. Let the market determine the value of money and the value of businesses, and then everybody will be more healthy and more prosperous. And I saw that bailout last November, and what you all know by now is that Kay Bailey voted for that. What you may not know is that your governor lobbied for that. He issued a press release as the chairman of the Republican Governors Association to Congress asking them to pass that first bailout. See, both of them thought that was good policy. And those of us that are watching Washington believe that we might be headed for a depression. We might be headed in this country for a period of hyperinflation. I'm a nurse by training. I do have that little female chromosome. Every now and then I get emotional, but I try real hard to make decisions on clear, objective facts and to identify maybe subtle changes. I got to watch patients and be aware of subtle changes in their condition before they crash and quit breathing. I want to see it coming so I can do what I need to do. And before this economy crashes and burns, we better have people in leadership that anticipate and to the degree possible do what they can to prevent suffering and to prevent economic hardship. And so if you're going to govern Texas, you might want to look at what's happening at the federal level and say, is there anything that Texas leadership can do to protect the economy of this 13th largest in the world from that disaster that's coming? If in fact we're headed to a period of hyperinflation, if in fact the US dollar is going to continue to lose value, are there things that Texas can do? And you know, I've been active for nearly 20 years, and every cycle we hear this is the worst, and every cycle it feels like it really is the worst. But it's caused me over the years to say, I wonder if those that we elect to office would recognize a policy that protects freedom versus one that destroys it. If it stood up and slapped them in the face, would we know the difference? Because sometimes I don't think we do. I had an opportunity recently to interview with a man named Gabriel Bruzon. Gabriel is the editor of a Spanish language newspaper in Austin, Texas, and knowing I grew up in South Texas, Bruzon's not a name you hear every day. And I said to him, what's the origin of that name? And he said, I'm Cuban. And I said, really? When did you come to the U.S.? And he said, about 3 years ago. I immigrated here. I said, how'd you get out? He said, I was a Christian missionary to Ecuador, and from there I immigrated to the United States. And I thought, well, the table just turned in this interview, because it's not often that I have the opportunity to talk to a man who grew up in a communist dictatorship. So I said to Gabriel, if I had taken a picture of you, Gabriel, a man standing on the street in Cuba in a communist dictatorship, and I took a picture of you today standing on the street in Austin, Texas, in a constitutional republic, tell me what would be the difference between the man in Cuba and the man in Austin. You know, I think we think that they'll turn yellow or purple or something, and we'll recognize a fascist when we see them by the color of their skin or the look. And so I said, what would be the difference? And he said, the man in Cuba had no dreams. Everything was free. Healthcare was free. Education was free. And we had no dreams. See, when you take from man what he works for, he quits working. And a country as wealthy as the Soviet Union starves, not because the resources aren't there, but because man will not produce. So my question about securing freedom in Texas and protecting the economy in Texas is really pretty simple. We get the government off of our back. We get Washington, D.C. off of our back. We get Austin out of our pockets. And we say to Texas farmers and ranchers, you want to plant it, you want to grow it, you want to sell it, get out there and get after it. We don't have an economic problem in Texas. We say to the Texas energy industry, if the Texas energy industry needs some regulating, we'll take care of it in Texas. We don't need Washington, D.C. You have no constitutional authority in energy. Get out of energy in Texas. We won't have an energy crisis in this country. We say to Washington, D.C., you know, we know that our Constitution, the Texas Constitution, says in order that our children will understand liberty, Texas will provide a free public education for the general dissemination of knowledge. Washington, we can teach our kids. We don't need your help. Thank you very much. Get out of education in Texas. Or maybe we ought to hold back on health care. See, some of us would recognize that this free society at one time rested on three pillars. We had families and individuals as one pillar of our society. We had communities and churches as another, and we had the government as the third. That three-legged stool doesn't stand on the government by itself. We've got to have the courage to say, I feel your pain, but I can't fix it for you. Go back home and take care of yourself and take care of your community. We don't need Washington, D.C. and health care. We will take care of ourselves. Stay out of health care. So the question becomes then, how do we do that? And what can the great state of Texas do to ensure the freedom and prosperity of Texans and to do as Glenn Beck and Napolitano espoused, lead the country back to a constitutional republic? We've got to first understand and ask ourselves, what is it? What's the difference, Gabriel, between that man in Cuba and that man in Texas? And the difference is, over all of history, the societies that are most free and most prosperous have private property ownership and gun ownership. Private property ownership and gun ownership sets us apart. It keeps us free. And you don't have to look very long to know where this is going. We've been debating property tax appraisal caps in Texas for about 4 years. It's not the issue. It enslaves us. We got to get rid of property tax in Texas. We got to own our property. That is not a fiscal issue. That is a freedom issue. When Claver talked tonight about no compromise, I've been saying that for weeks. You got to get that down. If you believe that private property ownership and gun ownership are the essential elements of freedom, and I challenge you, if there are others, you let me know what you think they are, but I believe to the core of my being, private property ownership and gun ownership keeps man free. If you're going to protect and preserve that and pass it on to the next generation, you cannot compromise. I don't care if you need a pothole filled. I don't care if you need a new police officer. I don't care if you need another room added onto the school. You cannot have my property and you cannot have my guns. I will not give up freedom to my children.